it. Good evening, everyone, and good morning as well to our friends from the UK. Welcome to this session, this night shift session, sessions with Mainstreet Australia and the Association of Town and Centre Management in the UK. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and this morning. We are so excited to be doing this joint session with you all. My name is Liz Joldeski. I'm the Executive Officer with Mainstreet Australia, and I'm absolutely thrilled. I've been working with OJ McDonald, the CEO at ATCM, for the last 12 months, and hi OJ. We've been chatting about all sorts of things, but particularly just how similar the issues and the opportunities and the challenges are for all of us that work and love and are involved in Mainstreet and town centre revitalisation. If I can just ask if you can just make sure that you're on mute if you're not speaking, please. Oops, I just realised that I still have the power and I've just muted everyone. So yeah, we're absolutely thrilled that we've been able to deliver this session for you tonight. Before I continue, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which I'm coming to you from. I'm coming to you from Naarm, otherwise known as Melbourne, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also welcome and thank any First Nations people if they might be joining us tonight. So our session tonight is covering that very topical issue around cost of living pressures and just what is the impact and how is it impacting small businesses, consumer behaviour and businesses on our main streets. So this is obviously not just happening here in Australia, it's also happening in the UK. And tonight we're absolutely thrilled that we've got two eminent experts from Australia and the UK to discuss this topic in further detail. So I was just reading, actually one of our committee members from Mainstreet Australia shared some research with the board this week from one of the leading banks in Australia, and it was just talking about a recent survey that was being done with consumers and just how much consumers reallocating their spending. And the average reallocation from this survey is around $450 a month that consumers are saying, I need to put this aside for essential items such as, paying my mortgage or paying rent, which means that's approximately $450. I think that equates to around £250 if I'm correct. It's not going towards discretionary spending. It's not going towards, people shopping on main streets or in small businesses. So it's quite huge. And a lot of analysts here are also saying that this change in behavior, it's not just, for now, that it could have some long-term implications. So what does this mean for all of us and what are happening on both sides of our hemispheres? First of all, to tackle this topic, I'm so thrilled to present a very close friend of ours and one of our fantastic members, Louise Grimmer. Louise Grimmer is well known to many of us in Australia. She's a researcher with the University of Tasmania. And she's also recently started her own retail consultancy business called Shopology. And she absolutely blew everyone away in Australia at our conference in Hobart. So we are absolutely thrilled to get another version and another session with Louise tonight. Louise, over to you. Please look forward to your presentation tonight on embracing consumer trends and what it means for businesses on our main streets.
Oh, thanks, Liz. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Liz. That was a very nice introduction. Hi, everyone. Good morning to those of you who are in the UK. It's 7 o'clock at night here in Australia. I live in Tasmania, which is the little island on the bottom of Australia. And it's really nice to connect with you guys over in the UK. So, look, I've only got 20 minutes and I am known for talking a lot. So I'm going to get right stuck into it. I think my screen is sharing, and if I just hit, is that okay? All right, great.
It's all good.
Thanks,
It's great,
Liz.
Louise.
Okay, thanks everyone. What I'm actually going to do today is possibly not talk quite so much about the financial constraints that we're seeing, but talk about some research that we've undertaken in Australia about the kinds of things that shoppers really want to see on their main streets. And the questions that we asked in this recent research have not really been asked in Australia. You guys who are on the call from the UK often ask these questions, but we don't really do this in Australia. So I want to share with you what shoppers are really looking for, and you might find it insightful to compare with what happens in the UK. So as Liz said, I'm a retail scholar at the University of Tasmania. My research is completely around local shopping, small independent stores, high streets, or we call them main streets, or local shopping areas, and how we can make those places the best places they can be. And I believe that one of the key ingredients is small and independent retailers and small businesses. So how we can support those kinds of businesses and make places really great for people to shop and to work and to play. So just very quickly, I have two photos over my desk that sort of spur me on in my work. This is obviously from the UK. This is the photo that spurs me on. This is what we don't want to see. And I think during COVID, we were a bit worried that this is what we were going to see, but thankfully, at least here in Australia, most retail areas actually did survive the pandemic. And this is the other photo that I have. This is again from the UK. This is Brighton. And to me, this is sort of what a lot of us are striving for when we talk about healthy main streets and places where people want to come and to be. This photo to me captures a lot of the elements that make up great places for people to come and shop and dine and have social interaction. So just a quick snapshot of retailing in Australia. Retailing is an important sector in Australia. It employs nearly 10% of our workforce, and it's valued at about $400 billion. The latest figures that we have are from August, and in August, Australians spent about $35.4 billion on retail. Now, we've obviously had some really huge growth in online retailing as a result of COVID. Online retailing in Australia now sits at about 20%. Now, this is insane for us because pre-COVID, it was sitting at about 7 to 8%. And unlike many, you guys who are here from the UK, in terms of grocery shopping, we used to have 2 to 3% people were shopping for groceries online. Now that's just completely exploded when we all had to get online and shop. And it might interest you to know that pre-COVID, 50% of Australian adults had never shopped online. That's insane. And if you think about the figures that you have in the UK, it's just not comparable. We just weren't doing that sort of activity. But now we had to shop online, and 1 in 5 retail sales are online. In our country, it's millennials who are shopping the most online, and what they're buying mostly is clothing and shoes. And what all shoppers report for online shopping is the number one driver for them is convenience. Now, in Australia, possibly as in the UK, we've got some real, problems with our economy at the moment. We've had over the past year, I think it was 12 interest rate rises in a row. That is in my lifetime unprecedented, and that's put a real pressure on household budgets. Because what's happened at the same time is our wages haven't kept up with the pace of the rises in interest rates and the problems with inflation. And so, as Liz said, people are cutting back on discretionary spending, but they're also cutting back on spending on essentials as well.
Yeah. We've experienced
I think someone got their microphone not on mute. So what we're seeing in Australia is that people are being much more careful about what they buy and how they spend. And what we've seen for the first time is in Australia, we have a duopoly in terms of supermarkets. We have Coles and Woolworths, and they account for 70% of all retail grocery spend. And what we've seen for the first time is that people are checking the prices at each of these supermarkets, and they're doing two shops. So whereas previously they might have gone to Coles or Woolworths just for their weekly shop, they're actually going to one supermarket first to buy the products that are cheaper, and then they're traveling to another one where the other products are cheaper. We've not seen that before. So this is really a big change in consumer shopping behaviour. Now, these are the Australian Bureau of Statistics retail sales data. And I'm sorry, this looks a bit complicated, but I'll explain it. This is the latest data from August. The figures that you see in red are the August figures, and the two preceding figures are June and July. So what you can see in Australia is it's all over the place. It's going up, it's going down. We've had some growth in clothing, footwear and accessories. We've had, sort of a dip and then a growth and then a dip again for department stores. And it's really just impossible almost to keep track of and to work out what's actually going on. So what I wanted to share with you now is some of the research that we did earlier this year, and we presented the data at the Mainstreet conference, the national conference, which was held in Tasmania, where I live, in August. And I'm going to get you involved in this research, if that's okay. So if you have a mobile phone with you, get ready to use it to either scan a QR code or to go onto a website in a moment. So in England, and a lot of the research that I do is actually influenced by a lot of the work that comes out of the IPM, the Institute of Place Management. So Kathy Parker, Professor Kathy Parker, I think she's I'm going to get it wrong, but she got an AM or an AO or something recently. So she's done some amazing work over a long period of time and has really influenced a lot of my research. So what we wanted to find out was, what are the important elements or characteristics of an ideal main street for Australian shoppers? They've never been asked these questions. A lot of us work as placemakers or people who work in local government. We might be planners or developers or economic development managers, or we might work for a trader association. And in Australia, we've never actually, we sort of do all these activities, and we do these activations and interventions and infrastructure, but we don't actually often ask the people who are using these places what's important to them. So we decided to do that with this research. We also asked them which kinds of shops and services they want on their ideal main street. And this was influenced by, I think in the UK, YouGov asks this question each year of citizens. And what we wanted to do then was also test for different kinds of shopper types and to see if the answers were different depending on whether you rated highly as a hedonic shopper or as a utilitarian shopper. Now, this is not a typology, they're separate scales. And a hedonic shopper is someone who really loves shopping. They love the whole act of shopping, the activity of shopping. They don't necessarily have to buy lots of things. They have a physiological reaction to shopping, and they have a sense of euphoria when they go shopping. These are the kinds of people we really want to attract to our main streets. But we also have utilitarian shoppers coming to our main streets too. So they're people for whom shopping is really a task. It's a chore that has to be endured. It doesn't bring any joy or satisfaction. It's just, another task that they need to do. And these kinds of people are all coming to our main streets. So we wanted to test for that. I've just been putting the finishing touches on a report about this research. So obviously, as an academic, I'm going to have to write it up as a boring academic paper, which will be published in a journal which no one will read. And that's not great. So there's a report that I'm putting together that's freely available. If you would like a copy of it, please just contact me. I've got my email at the end of this presentation, and I can email it to you. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it, and it's a lot more digestible than a boring academic paper. So what did we do? We used an online panel data company called Dynata in Australia. They're one of the leading consumer panel providers. So they have thousands of Australians that fill in consumer surveys for them. And the beautiful thing about it is they can get you the demographics of the sample that you need. So it costs a lot of money, but you can say, I want this, this, and this in the sample, and they will deliver it for you. So our sample was Australian shoppers. And the beautiful thing about our sample is it's completely representative of the Australian population. So in terms of the male and female split, or percentage of male and female people in the population, the age cohorts 18 and over, completely representative of those different age cohorts, as well as people who live in a metropolitan, so a city area versus a regional or a country area. And also our percentages match the states and territories in Australia. So we have some states that are very populous and other places like where I live, Tasmania, that don't have so many people. So our sample was completely representative of the population in terms of all of those sorts of things. So first of all, we asked them, which elements or characteristics of the ideal Main Street are the most important for you? We gave them a list of 21 different elements to choose from, and we asked them to rank each of the elements on a Likert scale, so a 1 to 7 Likert scale, 1 being not at all important, right through to 7 being very important. And we gave a little explanatory sentence for each of the elements. Now, these are the elements that we asked them to rank. So from 1 to 7, not at all important, through to very important. What I thought I might get you guys on the call to do is, if you've got your mobile phone with you, and I'll come back to this list, this is a little Mentimeter that I've set up. So if you have your mobile phone, you can just scan the QR code that is on the screen there, and that will take you to my word cloud. And or you can go to menti.com and just type in that code. So I'll just wait 1 minute until everybody might be able to access that, because I want to get your feedback. So every time I give this presentation, I try to get a word cloud from the people I'm presenting to, just to sort of compare it with the data that we got back through this study. So hopefully, if I'm just having a quick look, if everyone sort of might be on there, let's go back to our list. Now, if I can get you to put in just the first word of these things. So if you can put your top 3 elements in that you find important for your local high street or Main Street or your local shopping area. And if you just use the first word, that means if we all use it, try and get it to be uniform. So I'll just get you to do that now, and I'll just do mine as well so that I can sort of work out when we might be ready to finish. So you can just use the first word. Or you might want to put something in like retail mix, for example. But all the first words are different. And then if you just hit submit once you've done that, and we will come back to that word cloud at the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to go down. If you can use your little thumb up and just let me know if you've been able to do that. Or if you're on the video, you could put your thumb up as well. OJ, have you that's given you enough time to put those in? All right. These are going to be up on the screen anyway as I go through. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what the top 5 were from our overall sample. Now, these are going to change as I go through the presentation, because we're going to look at hedonic shoppers, and these kinds of people are very different, but this was our overall sample. So when I give this at a live audience, I always say to people, what do you think number 1 was, everyone? And people yell out different things. Well, number 1 was cleanliness. Number 2 was safety and security. Number 3 was parking. Number 4 was walkability. And then we had a tie for 5, which was services and amenities and the retail mix. So that was from our overall sample. Now, what this allowed us to present to you as well is the sort of bottom 5. Now, remember, we've got a Likert scale from 1 to 7. So the anchor is 4. And what I want to just point out is that nothing was below 4. So what I'm about to show you is not that people didn't like it or they didn't think it was important. It just wasn't as important as these things I've just shown you. And the reason I'm saying that is that when I presented this at Mainstreet, people got a little bit upset because what I'm about to show you is a lot of the things that we think are important to sort of place people and people who are into high streets. So if we look at what the bottom 5 were, the first one was public art, followed by history and culture, events and activities, marketing and promotion, and the nighttime economy. But don't despair, everyone, because I'm going to come back to this with our hedonic shoppers a little bit later in the presentation. So then we ask people, what kinds of shops and services do you want to see on your ideal local main street? And I was really influenced by the YouGov poll that you guys do over in the UK, which asks these questions as well. So we gave people a list of 45 different stores and services, and we asked them just to rank them from 1 to 45, with 1 obviously being the most important. Now, I should just say here that I neglected to put in 2 kinds of stores, and I need to do it next time round. The 2 kinds of stores were an adult shop, so a sex shop. I completely forgot to put that in. And I also forgot to put in a vaping or a cigarette store. And in Australia, they're not actually classified as shops. They have a certain kind of classification. But nevertheless, I think that if I had put those in, those kinds of stores would probably be in this list that I'm going to show you for the least wanted stores. So that's one of my limitations. But anyway, let's have a look at the top 10 most wanted. Now, again, I would ask the question, what do you think number 1 might be? But it's a bit hard to do it online. Number 1, overwhelmingly across all of the sample that we had, was a pharmacy. And it didn't matter what age you were or where you lived or whether you were hedonic or utilitarian, everybody wants a pharmacy, followed by, this is our overall sample, and these are the kinds of stores that they want to see on their main street. Now, the interesting thing about this list is that 7, 8, 9, and 10, those 4 kinds of stores and services are fast disappearing from main streets around Australia and possibly in the UK as well from high streets. But you know, at the same time, this is overwhelmingly what people really want to see on their ideal main street. So that's a bit of a tension there. If we look at age cohorts, we can see that the kinds of stores and services that people want really don't differ that much. There might be a bit of jostling in the top 10, and the ones I've got there in red are the additions. So younger people want a lifestyle or a gift store, and they want fast food or takeaway. The older cohort, and we condensed for the purposes of this presentation, 66 plus was everybody, because as you get older, you get fewer people in your sample. So sometimes you have to collapse them together. They want a hairdresser and a barber. If you live in a city area, it really doesn't change too much. If you live in the country, it doesn't change too much either. Most of those things are in the top 10. They're just sort of jostling for which spot. And you can see the additions in red for city people and for country people as well. With that ranking then gave us the 10 least wanted stores. So this is where I thought I might see cigarette vape shops and adult stores if I'd put them in. But number 1 was a bookmaker's, followed by these kinds of stores and services here. Some of these were surprising to me. I would have thought that most people might like to have a dry cleaner or a laundrette on their main street, and also a gallery or an antique store or secondhand store. But that was the top 10 least wanted, or the 10 least wanted. And if we look at the age cohorts, again, it doesn't change too much. You've got the sort of tattoo parlors, the bookmakers, etc. But you can see the additions there for the youngest age cohort and the oldest age cohort. If we look at the city and the country, again, doesn't really change too much. The little asterisks are where we had a tie for, whatever number it was in the top 10. Now it starts to get interesting. So we wanted to find out, are hedonic or utilitarian shoppers different in what they want? And we found that they were. So in our sample, we found that we had 25% of people rated as being very strongly hedonic. Now, hedonic shoppers are usually female, and in our sample, they were significantly scoring higher on the hedonic shopping scale. 35% of our sample were strongly utilitarian, and it's probably no surprise to you that they were male shoppers and significantly higher scoring on the utilitarian shopping scale. The other thing to bear in mind is that all of us, as we get older, we become less hedonic and we become more utilitarian. And that was found in our data as well. If you have a look, these are the age cohorts. The most hedonic were 18 to 25, the youngest cohort, followed by the other two that I've got there on the screen. And our utilitarian shoppers were actually the 66 to 75 age group, but then you can see the other older age groups were utilitarian. There's no difference between hedonic shopping if you live in a city or if you live in a country town or a regional centre. But there is a difference between utilitarian shoppers. There are more utilitarian shoppers living in city areas than there are in regional centres and country towns. So we asked them again, we looked at the data, which elements and characteristics are the most important for you? So here's what the hedonic shoppers thought. Now, this is very different from what I just showed you from the overall. So what they're interested in are events and activities, marketing and promotion, public art, history and culture, and aesthetics. 4 of these things were in the least important when I showed you the overall data. Now, this makes sense. Hedonic shoppers want to have a great shopping experience. So they want things to look nice. They want interesting things to do. They want an area to be marketed and promoted and branded. Public art is important, and also things like an area being able to interpret and celebrate and promote history and culture. If we look at our utilitarian shoppers, they're very, very different. So they look a lot like our overall sample. Here's what they found important. Wayfinding, signage and information was number 1. Now that makes sense. If you're a utilitarian shopper, you are wanting to get in and out really quickly. You just want to get your chores done and your tasks done. So being able to find your way around is very important. Cleanliness, safety and security, walkability and graffiti and vandalism. Now, when I talk about graffiti and vandalism, that is a lack of graffiti and vandalism. So it's where the town is keen to make sure that there's not too much graffiti and they clean up any vandalism. So if we now ask hedonic and utilitarian shoppers, what shops and services do you want to see? Interestingly, it doesn't really change too much. So you can see, again, pharmacy is number 1, and there are a couple of new entrants there in red. So the main difference between hedonic and utilitarian shoppers is not in the shops and services that they want. It's really in the elements and characteristics of the Mainstreet. And we've not asked these questions of Australian shoppers before in this country. So just in the interest of time, I'll just check in with our word cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop sharing these, and hopefully this works if I share my screen and go to, sorry, I'm just going to go to Menti, and hopefully this works, everyone. You don't want that one. I think you want, oh yes, that's it.
We can see it, Louise.
Yeah, great. Okay, so everyone, this is your data. So we can see number 1 is the retail mix. Yay! That's always a great thing to see. And you can see, though, safety and security has come up as a really important element as well. Small businesses are there, walkability, greenery and cleanliness. And then you can see some of the other ones there too. Small and small business are probably, that small business might have made small even bigger. So you can see there are big differences between what different cohorts of shoppers want. And now I'll just go back to my slide presentation. And here it is here. Sorry, everyone. So to us in Australia, this is really interesting because we've never asked these questions before. And obviously our high streets have to grapple with all of these different kinds of shoppers who are coming to shop, to work, to play. Just reminding you of what the overall results were on that one. And so what we're doing with this data now is sharing it with local governments, sharing it with economic development people, sharing it with individual retailers and trader associations as well, so that we can try and contribute to all of the work that's going on around Australia in all of our different states and territories, trying to make sure that our local retail places are the very best they can be, that they survive through this sort of COVID tale that we are going through in Australia, and that we all deserve great places to shop, to work, to play, to visit. And this has been a really interesting project. So thank you very much for allowing me to share that data with you. And I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Louise. I got so much more from that the second time around. So that was brilliant.
Sorry. Yeah, you've seen that before.
It was great. And I have one question before I hand over to OJ to introduce our second speaker, Niki Butler. I'm sure our friends in the UK are asking the same thing. Like, why do people not want pubs on Main Street?
I know. I didn't. Sorry, I forgot to say that one, because I would like a pub on a Main Street. I think my answer, because I've been asked this before when I've given this presentation, is there are pubs and there are pubs. So I think the UK does have fabulous pubs. I'm not sure that Australia has as fantastic pubs as the UK does. A lot of our pubs have, like other pubs do, problems with noise and, behaviour after hours. And I'm just wondering if that might have something to do with it. However, having said that, we don't have a lot of people living in city areas like they do in the UK and in Europe. I just wonder if pubs just are associated with drunken, loutish behaviour, and maybe that's why they're not wanted on main streets. But I wouldn't mind a nice pub on my high street or main street.
Absolutely. Thank you for that so much, Louise. And love to get perspective from OJ and Niki on that question of pubs and their their prevalence or importance for main streets. So with that, maybe I will hand over to you, OJ, and I'd love for you to introduce our next speaker, Niki Butler. Thank you, OJ.
Fab, thank you. Welcome everybody to the UK. It's morning time here. So OJ McDonald Association of Town and City Management, partners of Mainstreet Australia. Just to give you a little flavour of the UK context, October last year, inflation hit a whopping 11.1%, and that has completely sort of undermined high streets here in the UK. And we get the sense now that that's having really long-term impacts on the way consumers are shopping, as Louise has been explaining. So we're still trying to get through the details of exactly what's happening. Inflation now is down to 6.3%, but as our target rate is 2%, we are still way above where we want to be. So we work with data partners to help us understand exactly what's happening to UK shoppers and high streets. And I'm delighted that Beauclair data is able to join us today. So Niki Butler will be talking us through what's happening in the UK. So Beauclair is an organisation that effectively takes big data, big trends, and extrapolates that to see what that means for local communities and high streets here in the UK. So Niki, without further ado, do you want to take it away?
Brilliant. Thanks so much, OJ. And thank you very much, Louise. That was fascinating. With no background in kind of consumer behaviour psychology, I would say if you did the same thing in the UK, pub would be at the top.
Number one.
That would be my hypothesis. Super. Let me just share my screen. Okay, perfect. So as OJ mentioned, I'm sales and marketing lead for Beauclair data. My background is actually kind of FMCG, so I've worked with blue chip companies like Mars and KP, but I suppose I've really got a passion for using that consumer insight and using that consumer data to kind of really drive out what does that mean for our customers, and how can we use that to, drive business growth. And this is the team at Beauclair Data. We were set up in 2020 by Rob, and it was really all around trying to make those insights accessible and affordable. So our client base at the moment, we've got people like Manchester, Glasgow, Salisbury, and we're delivering monthly insights to those people in terms of like a dashboard of retail trends, and there's lots of different questions there that we're helping answer. In terms of where our data comes from, because that's always a critical question, it comes from a national data set of millions of debit card transactions. They are strictly anonymized, clearly, so we're not looking at anything identifiable, but because they are geotagged, we can get a lot of information from that data. Our data provider is a third-party service provider for banks and other financial institutions, and it allows us to look at trends across sales values, transaction volumes, and customer numbers, broken down by region, broken down by retail sector. And because those card payments are geotagged, that enables us to see a bit of customer profiling. Where are those people coming from, and how do they spend their money? In terms of the task today that OJ set me, it's to look at what is a broad overview of what is happening in our UK retail high streets, and clearly that's a big brief. And so what we're going to show in most of the slides is, I suppose, a national view of those 62 cities. And we use the definition from one of our clients, Centre for Cities, in terms of their primary urban areas. And I'll be looking to hopefully answer some of these questions and provide you with data from the high streets to give our take on what these mean. So what's the impact of COVID and cost of living been? How has performance changed this year versus last year? Have individual cities recovered sales and customers versus 2019? What are the sector winners and losers? What's behind that? And also, are we seeing any shifts in spend in terms of weekday to weekend? And are we seeing any changes in sort of a typical city centre customer base? So hopefully it's not the time to mention it, OJ, if that's wrong. Hopefully that's what everybody's here to hear. So the first chart here really clearly looks at the monthly growth trends. So this is monthly growth in customers in green, and monthly growth in sales, going right the way back to January 2019 and coming up to our latest data point, which is August 2023. And you can see very clearly the negative impact in March 2020, and then again in January 2021 of those COVID lockdowns, causing that massive downtrend in both of those measures. What you also see is typically that trend in customers very much closely matches the trend line for spend, apart from in our little kind of yellow starred areas, which are the Christmas peak, where the really positive news is that sales kind of comes away and kind of runs higher for that festive season. And the really positive news is, so we look to 2023, the Christmas sales peak was ahead of 2021 and ahead of 2019, and those customers were nearly back in line with the kind of pre-COVID 2019 levels. And hopefully what you'll go on to see is there are some really positive indicators in the UK, and so one of the questions is if that trend continues, is everybody prepared for kind of a successful Christmas 2023? You can also see, exactly as Louise mentioned, inflation running at an extraordinary rate, an unprecedented rate, as OJ said. So this chart on the right shows our ONS measures of inflation on the same monthly basis, and peaking out at over 10%. And what you can see that, how you can see that playing out in that sales and customer line is you can start to see that sales line pulling away from customers. So we are starting to see sort of, the significant cost inflation build, at a total level. As I just mentioned, the really good news is we are seeing some positive indicators. And so this chart shows against each the key measures: sales, customers, transactions, which is kind of volume of transactions, and the average transaction value, that we're seeing some really strong metrics year to date. The blue bars initially show the spend growth and spend from August year to date 2022 versus August 2019. This shows we've got 6% more customers, but they are spending just 2% more. So exactly as Liz mentioned in her introduction, you know, we're really seeing that evidence play out, that customers are dropping their level of spend. So, you know, it's not necessarily about losing customers, but they are all reducing that spend level to mitigate that cost of living and inflationary impact. The trends in the green bars show the great news that year to date, August 2023, there's stronger growth across all of those metrics versus year to date, August 2019. And particularly of note is that 11% customer growth and that 7% sales growth. You know, we have really seen kind of at the beginning of this year, the strength and resilience of our cities. And that's very much, you know, down to no least some of the efforts of some of the people in the room and making sure those cities stay really attractive places to be. Transaction volumes are up, but less so than sales and customers. So that drop in revenue does continue. And I think, you know, that seems likely now that that will be a trend that we'll have to kind of work with. You know, people continue to manage their budget by shopping smaller amounts. And that transactions growth could also be impacted by the increased ease and reduced spending limits for debit card kind of tap and go transactions. And the accelerated trend from cash to card that we saw in the UK from 2019. Clearly, city centre growth is not equal across all cities. All of our cities in the UK are very different. And so what you can see here is the really good news that nearly 70% of the 62 cities have seen spend growth, August year to date 2023 versus August year to date 2019. And over 60% of those cities have seen customer growth on the same period. Those with excellent eyesight will see that the top 10 is dominated by Northern England, Scotland and Wales. So featuring Barnsley, Blackpool, York, Liverpool, Wakefield, Newcastle, Worthing, Edinburgh, Burnley and Swansea. Whereas the bottom 10 currently holds kind of a Southern English majority: Coventry, Stoke, Basildon, Birmingham, Slough, Wigan, Reading, Southampton, Peterborough and Middlesbrough. And so in terms of what's driving this, when we worked with Centre for Cities, we really saw inflation hitting northern towns higher. You know, for example, less energy efficient housing led to higher bills. So potentially as that inflation eases, those places might be seeing more of a benefit. It's also potentially likely that in the south, where we've got higher house prices, that those interest rate rises are hitting harder. And I suppose from, in terms of, you know, so what perspective, because clearly it's not very easy to change your housing stock, I suppose this is just about understanding, you know, what are the barriers that are specific to your city, you know, that maybe you can't do anything about, like housing prices or, you know, energy inefficiencies, you know, and how is that going to impact the spend and the kind of behaviour in your area. In terms of digging into the sector performance, I think, you know, Louise, whenever I said I was pretty confident that pubs would feature heavily, that you know, food and drink is absolutely our kind of outstanding winner in terms of UK high street performance. Grocery is also up there. And then general retail, the big department stores, is seeing the biggest losses versus 2019. So on average, across our 62 cities, August year to date, food and drink is that single biggest growth driver. And where it's really benefited is, you know, that you really can't replicate having a coffee or having a meal out on the internet. Grocery is also seeing significant growth over the period, really capitalising on that COVID dominance when it was one of the few store categories open. And, you know, we hypothesise now, you know, doing lots more food on the go and kind of convenience in that high street setting. Health and beauty and fashion have kind of struggled a little bit last year, but have both seen good returns to fortune in the last year, with quite strong August year to date 2023 performances. You know, really supporting that hypothesis that it's going to be these experiential retail categories, you know, things where people can go in and engage with the product and engage with, you know, the communities that they, you know, are kind of shopping with. And general retail, arguably, it's kind of the reverse. General retail is obviously the category where online is the biggest threat. And so, that has definitely seen the biggest demise when we look at the sales, and very reflective of the big name high street closures that we've seen in the UK since 2019, people like Debenhams and Woolworths impacting. And again, I suppose one of the positive elements here is that is seeing a stronger performance in year to date. So, have we come out of that with a stronger general retail, but smaller and more efficient? Question mark. So when we want to try and really understand what's driving those sector performances, the kind of really great news is that we can dig into that further. And what we can look at is, is sales up? Is that just because it's inflation? Is it just because people are spending more because things are costing more? And what we can look at is, customers, sales, average transaction value, and then looking at that transaction value in August 23 and August 19 to get a sense of how those categories compare. And so what you can see here is, digging in behind that food and drink trend are some really positive metrics. 46% up on sales and 17% up on customers, and those transaction values up 12%, kind of in line with that inflationary pressure that we know is kind of heavily impacting that category. But I think what's also really worth noting on food and drink is that it does have quite a low average transaction value, likely due to kind of regular coffee shop spending, and kind of high street on-the-go convenience spending. And when we look at grocery, that's looking at kind of quite a similar pattern of trends, sales up, customers up, and kind of a relatively kind of low ATV. Health and beauty, as we can see, is showing some sales growth, but the customers are still down. Fashion is behind. However, those two categories, as we said, are really seeing a good resurgence year to date, August 23 versus year to date, August 22. And what's really noting or worth looking at here is that these categories are associated with much higher average transaction value. And therefore, if you lose these customers, then you kind of will see a disproportionately negative effect on kind of that mix. And so really the question here, I suppose, to pose is how can, the sort of world of place and you guys convert those customers effectively and trade them up. So, if the drivers of people are coming into the high street are to have food and drink and grocery, but they're spending not very much, how can you make sure that they don't leave until they've, made a much higher fashion or health and beauty purchase? Could you look at linking like a coffee shop till receipt to say on this day only you can get £5 off your, fashion or health and beauty purchase? Could you execute it on a sort of low spend day, such as a Sunday, to maximize the benefits? So, that's really the question to kind of then, sort of posed after you sort of looked at all these insights. It's the, so what does that, mean? How do we then, use this data to, create a better, customer experience? And in general, contrast to all of that positive news, unfortunately, we have general retail down 24% in sales and 10% in customers and 20% in ITV. As we said, this is very much kind of feeling the impact of that online transition, but is seeing a resurgence year to date. So, have we come out of all of those closures with a kind of, really sort of fit for purpose, general retail sector? Is that now kind of something that as Louise referenced, is still up there in terms of what people are looking for? Potentially now, can we make that a better category and drive that back into growth? So this is a very data-heavy chart, apologies, but this is looking at the key measures split across weekends and weekdays. And for the purposes of this data, our weekday is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and our weekend is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we're looking at whether or not any of these measures, like sales, customers, transactions, or ATVs, have sort of shifted between 2019 and 2023. And actually what you can see is when you look at all cities and all sectors combined, there isn't much of a shift coming through. But when we look at food and drink and we dig into that, you can see a shift from weekend to weekday to weekend spend. But this isn't really the customer numbers. This is exactly as we talked about before, really playing out that sort of transaction change. So, people who were buying coffee every day for 5 weeks who might now are every day for 5 weekdays, who are now only in 2 days a week, you know, are still shopping in the same way, but they're doing 2 transactions, not 5 transactions. And so that's what we can really see impacting that weekday food and drink. And in Swiss Exchange, we are then seeing a higher number of transactions going through at the weekend. And the good news is that those weekend average transaction values across all the categories are generally a lot higher. You know, we're kind of a bit more relaxed. We're obviously, you know, more open to spend. You know, so have we got the right trade up weekend opportunities available so that, you know, when consumers are looking to make that up trade, that we've got those options there. In contrast, for example, fashion doesn't really see very many shifts, you know, and potentially that's down to the fact that it's not as intrinsically linked to kind of that working from home trend. You probably didn't go into work and go fashion shopping every night after work. Whereas if you kind of went into work, you probably did go and get a coffee once a day. So, you know, it may well be that that is the reason for that staying fairly static. So this is information that, again, we collate for our clients, because when you basically buy in a shop, when you tap your debit card, you then link to your home address. And so we use this data, again, strictly aggregated and anonymized, to work out where customers have come from. And now clearly everybody's geographical view of in town and out of town varies, and some of our clients want to look at things like our, you know, people within a 15-minute radius, you know, in terms of what their objectives are. So it's very difficult to give you a average, but this is, I would say, a typical look at what we are seeing across our client base. That post-COVID, you know, or pre-COVID, in time was say 62% and out of town was 38%. Post-COVID, this is 22 looking at, that in-time number is much higher. So it's at 67% and out of town 33. So that shift away from those out-of-town customers to kind of a more localized client base is definitely something that we see play out on a number of different clients. And this, from that home address, we can also allocate each of those customers a kind of customer demographic, a cameo. And so I'm not going to get into the definitions of cameo, but they basically run, you know, a level of affluence. And so these 5 groups are the lowest affluence categories. And so what you can see again is the sales contribution in 2019. The sales that went through those 5 lowest affluence groups was about 29%. And then in 2022, it had increased to about 33%. And again, this is a dynamic that we see playing out. Those city centre customers are sort of becoming less affluent, and the percentage going through kind of those higher affluent levels, maybe because those people are shopping more online, we're sort of seeing, you know, a decline. So this is the kind of, you know, sort of final, so what? You know, 2023, you know, our COVID and cost of living crisis has obviously impacted our UK towns and cities, but so far 2023 has really seen that recovery shift up a gear. You know, so are your retailers planning for Christmas success? 69% of our individual cities have recovered sales versus 2019, and 61% of customers, you know, with that northern bias, you know, due to elements such as housing stock. You know, the real question is, do you know what your customer spend barriers are? Thirdly, you know, experiential categories that can be less replicated online, like food and drink and, you know, health and beauty, are really driving that performance. You know, things that can't, you know, easily be, you know, purchased online, and you don't obviously get the same experience. Have you got the right retail leisure mix? How can you attract the right businesses into your high streets? Fourthly, food and drink and grocery are bringing in the customers. How can you trade those customers up to higher value sectors such as fashion and health and beauty? Food and drink, the spend pattern is shifting to higher value weekend spends. Does that present an opportunity for those sort of trade up weekend options? And finally, this point of more localized, less affluent city centre customers, you know, how do you make sure that you've got the right shopping experience and marketing strategies for this core group? And what are your opportunities to kind of re-attract that sort of more affluent out of town spend? I think that's me. Any questions?
All very quiet. Yeah, we've got a few minutes left. Any questions for Niki? Thank you so much, Niki. That was Fantastic. So much, incredible data and insights there.
I've got one. It's Louise here.
Bye, Louise.
Oh, thanks, Niki. That was so interesting. I just wanted to ask you, with your data, do you get also online spend data, or is it just in physical store data?
So this is just physical spend data.
Yeah.
And so because when you spend in a sort of high street, the way that we sort of set up or that we're looking at the spend associated with those stores in the high street. Obviously, if you spend online, you kind of that's linked to your home address.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't kind of count, if you will, as sort of city centre spend.
Yeah.
It is data that we have access to. It's not something that we provide because it doesn't really kind of answer the question about what that means for your city centre on a regular basis, but it's certainly data that we can look at.
Yeah, the only reason I was asking was just that that service I was telling you about before we started the presentation in Australia. They, I believe, do what you do, and then they also report on the online spend. And I guess that's just to sort of show town centre managers and people who are interested what the breakdown is of the online versus the in-store physical spend. Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Niki. Awesome.
Thank you, Louise. Are there any other questions? Any other questions for Niki? OJ, over to you. And maybe if you'd like to give a bit of a wrap up as well. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm conscious that you guys over in the UK have got a day of meetings and things to do, whereas we're getting ready to go to bed here.
Yeah, don't want to hold you guys back from having a bit of a hot chocolate and going to bed. So, Niki, a quick question for you. So, do you know Louise presented some quite frightening stats on the growth of online shopping in Australia, sort of from pre-COVID to post-COVID, which I'm quite astonished by those figures. Is that in any way comparable to what's happened in the UK? My gut feeling is because we were always early adopters of online shopping, actually we haven't seen that same level of growth because it's all in there. We've already been sitting at around sort of 20% online.
Yeah, I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I think the general consensus in the UK is that we saw like a massive dip that in fact we've probably bottomed out about where we would have been had we just seen that general trajectory of growth in online shopping just continue as it was. So I think we've ended up in not a dissimilar position. I'm not sure whether we're as much as 20% online shopping. I think the other thing for us is it really varies by category. And so, what we're seeing is, where that online threat is highest, where there, wasn't a kind of, with grocery, for example, it hasn't impacted massively because there was quite a high prevalence of grocery shopping initially, whereas maybe somewhere like, kind of general retail and, there wasn't so much of it going on, where you didn't have that kind of existing behavior and the pandemic has created it, then those categories are now sort of more under threat. And so I think there's definitely an impact, but I wouldn't say we're kind of, I don't think we've had the seismic shift. Yeah.
If I can just jump in there, this is Louise here. In Australia, we weren't predicting that we would get to the level that we are now until 2025. This was pre-COVID. We were so low. We used to look at you guys and see how you were buying groceries online, and we just did not do that at all. Australians did not adopt that at all. We didn't even do click and collect. That was just something that people just didn't even understand. And then when we went into lockdown and we had to go online shopping, as I said, 50% of the Australian adult population had never shopped online before. They were concerned about credit card theft. and deliver. It was just alien to us. But you can see the huge growth in what's happened, and that's entirely because of the pandemic. And about 50% of those people who'd never shopped online before said that they were totally fine with it now, and they've totally adopted it, and that's a continuing behaviour. So that figure that we have now of 20%, we did not predict that at all in Australia. It was because what I just, sorry, I'll stop talking in a minute, but what I just wanted to say was, different from the UK, our population of 25 million is spread over a huge geographical area. I mean, we are a ginormous country. We don't have delivery times like you guys do. When we see delivery times of, in the hour or the next day, where I live, I'm on an island. Things just don't happen the same way they do in the UK. And I think that's what impacted. And that's why we never picked it up, but we had to because of COVID, and people haven't gone back. So it's a seismic shift in Australia.
It is. It is absolutely massive. Yeah. And
Really
thank you.
good
Sorry to
observation.
jump in. I'm just conscious of the time and very conscious that everyone in the UK is probably going off to other meetings. So I just wanted to wrap it up and just say thank you so much to Louise and to Niki for your presentations. It was so valuable. We will be sharing the presentations from Niki and Louise, and also this recording with all of you. So thank you again for joining us this evening. OJ, well done to yourself and to ourselves. I think we should pat ourselves on the back, and I think we should start planning for the next session. And love to hear from all of you here tonight, what else you'd like us to talk about. I feel like even a general session where we just sort of have a bit of a fireside chat and just exchange, some best practices, some lessons, and some things that are working on your side and things that aren't working so well. I think something like that, something even less formal might even work well for next time. So thank you all once again. Hope you all have a great day, and to our Australian Main Street Australia members, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time online. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good night.
Hope to
Thanks,
see
Louise
you.
and
Thank
Niki. Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
OJ.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks, Liz.
Bye.